Well, here we are. It's May already. When did that happen? I'm delighted to be here with you again for our May u3a podcast. This is Maggie West, and as always, I think you'll be delighted that you've tuned in. Our reporters have hunted down some interesting articles this month. We're still celebrating 250 years of Jane Austen. You'll hear of the fascinating connection from her to Winchester Cathedral.
I wondered what on earth I could do to give back to the cathedral, and I thought the best thing I could do was to join the scribes. It was the nearest to my drawing, so that's where and how it started. And the scribes do the most beautiful calligraphy.
Next, we want to encourage you to sharpen your thinking even more by understanding a little about what is behind it.
It turns out that the brain is not a single general chip, and we now know that different parts of the brain do different things.
And our finale, a very, very talented man who wears many hats.
And then I added Sherlock Holmes, and then I added Hercule Poirot. So basically I've added one every year, one or two every year since. So I now do 24 different talks.
Please accompany me on this learning journey over the next 30 minutes. I think you'll be glad you did. Today, we're delighted to explore the world again of Jane Austen through the eyes of Caroline, a gifted artist whose stunning calligraphy and illustrations have brought a new dimension to Winchester Cathedral. From her first foray into creating Jane Austen-inspired cards to transforming Regency charm into art, Caroline shares her journey of passion, research, and creativity that not only captivates but also gives back to a historic institution. Caroline Hervey-Bathurst talked to Maggie D about her passion for Jane Austen and creating artwork for sale in Winchester Cathedral, relating to scenes from her books.
Caroline, you have been doing some amazing artwork on behalf of Winchester Cathedral, and it's all about Jane Austen. How long have you been doing this?
Well, I think the first set of cards that we printed was in 2006. And the reason I did it was because I had two choristers singing in the choir, and I used to go and listen to it, and I got completely addicted to it. And when the two boys had left, that was after 10 years, I wondered what on earth I could do to give back to the cathedral. So I went for an open day, a huge open day in the huge nave of Winchester Cathedral, and I thought the best thing I could do was to join the scribes. It was the nearest to my drawing, so that's where and how it started. And the scribes do the most beautiful calligraphy, and I looked at their artwork and I thought I could help them with their artwork. So that's how it started. And I said to my husband, I'm terrified, I'm not an illustrator, I'm a painter, but I'm not an illustrator. And it's a completely different approach. So these cards might not sell. Now, we must pay for the first print run. So we printed 4 designs, 2,000 of, about 500 of each. And they ran off the shelves. They were very, very successful, I'm relieved to say. So we kept on. And then gradually we filled the shop. And then we filled Cornflowers, the local lovely shop next door to very near the shop. And Jane Austen's House Museum, they sold very well there, Godmersham Park and Goodnestone Park. So, and this went on for many years, and we made a huge amount of money for the cathedral.
And where do you get your inspiration for the scenes?
The scenes are reading the books and her letters. Yeah, and I've read the books since I was 12 years old. When I first read Northanger Abbey as a schoolgirl, I absolutely loved it. I loved her writing. And my father was a great reader of Jane Austen. We used to spend time thinking how the Nottinghamshire ladies fitted with the modern, with the Jane Austen ladies, and so on. So she's such a brilliant writer. She really is. And her descriptions of the seaside are absolutely wonderful. I adore the sea. She's very poetical, lovely. I mean, that's why she's lasted, really.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's essentially, they're just romantic novels.
Yes,
But it's actually the language that she uses and the way she uses it.
Beautiful, the way she uses it. Absolutely. Yeah.
So,
And the accuracy of the dresses had to be terribly important too. So I used to go up to the Victoria and Albert where they've got period dresses, and there was a sale going on in South Kensington. And my friend Charlotte Gear from the British Museum rang me up and said, Caroline, you've got to drop everything, go up and see these wonderful dresses that are being sold tomorrow. So I did go up, and I spent the whole 2 or 3 hours sketching the dresses, and I was surprised how beautifully made they are. And the silks are so, the exquisite 18th century silks. And the cotton dresses are sort of linen, more like the very highest quality curtain material, I would describe them all. Because remember, no washing machines in those days, everything was hand done, and everything had to last. And Jane Austen would have been a very good seamstress. So you had to do your own clothes.
and these pictures that you do of Jane Austen,
Yeah.
you actually use a model for them, I believe.
Oh, yes, my grandchildren. Yes, my grandchildren, Mr. Darcy, Catherine, Lady Catherine.
And they're all dressed up in period costume.
Yes.
And where do you get the period costume
Well,
from?
wait a minute. I've had one which I was given by my sister-in-law. It was beautifully made. It's absolutely lovely. And the others were homemade by a dressmaker.
Yeah. So how many different scenes have you now done?
40.
Wow. And how,
Yes.
in what way do you package them?
We package them. They're sold singly, and they're also sold in wallets. And we put about 5 different ones. But I've got 4 different sets of 5, if you know what I mean. So
And in the wallet says notelets.
yes, as notelets with envelopes. Yes.
And you say they are original, and the only place that you can buy them is where?
Well, from now on, you can say they're only to be bought at the cathedral. Yes, and I think they do a postage service, but I'm not sure about that. You should be able to buy them online, in other words.
And some of the backgrounds to Jane Austen, the pictures that you're making, the backgrounds are actually from places that she lived.
Oh, goodness, yes. And luckily, I live in a Regency house. Part of my house is Regency. So all the windows and the hallway, for example, a lot of scenes were done in my house, which is so lucky. Otherwise, I went to Jane Austen's House Museum and the library there and did the scenes from there, or inside Chawton itself.
Chawton House near Alton.
Yes, no, I'm terribly careful to do that. And the last card I've done, I've actually, where she died, and she died in Winchester. I actually got into the room where she died. So the girl in the blue dress by the window is absolutely right, and she's on a proper Regency sofa, which you would have had.
I'm dreadful on dates, but I know that 2025 has a particular importance where Jane Austen is concerned.
Yes, because she's 250 years since she was born.
What age was she when she died?
41.
Is there anything concerning what you have been doing for Winchester Cathedral that I haven't asked you and you would like to tell me?
Oh, and we do. We're doing for this year. We're doing prints from some of the original paintings. Yes.
How long does it take you to do, say, one sketch, one drawing?
Well, there was a lot of work goes into it, and everything was very well researched. Yeah.
You say it doesn't take you very long, but what is not very long in reality?
Oh no. Well, for instance, Persuasion of the ones by the seaside. We used to rent a house for grandchildren in July. And I took dresses down, and they had to dress up when they'd been swimming in the sea while I sketched them. So, no, they had to wear these dresses. They got very cross sometimes and prance up and down while I sketched them in the evening before they had their supper. Yes.
Do your grandchildren enjoy being your grandchildren?
Well, and I was met on the doorstep. We are not having Jane Austen today. We're just not having Jane Austen today. So I may have overdone it sometimes.
Do you have a favourite that you did?
I think I love the sea, you see. I love Persuasion. Yes, I did love sitting on the beach.
Well, thank you very much for chatting with me, Caroline.
Right. Yes.
Such a pleasure.
Thank you for tuning in to this inspiring conversation with Caroline and our reporter, Maggie D. Jane Austen just continues giving. ever wondered what's really going on inside your head? From decoding vision and sound to understanding language and memory, your brain is working harder than you think, and in ways you'd never imagine. In this episode, our reporter Maggie D talks to Bob Pullen from Newcastle u3a. He's a former medical lecturer and brain researcher whose popular u3a talks have sparked huge interest in the secrets of the human brain. Bob unpacks the astounding way our minds interpret the world and why even the simple act of moving your body can sharpen your thinking. If you've got a brain and you're using it, you'll really want to hear this.
I'm really interested in how come you're doing so many different types of video learning sessions on the u3a main website, and they're all seemingly connected with psychology or the brain. Would you like to explain why it is and how you come to do that?
Yes, well, the talks do delve into psychology some of the time. The reason is I spent most of my working life teaching medical students or pharmacy students about how the brain works, and of course, how the brain doesn't work sometimes. And I'm retired now, but as the years went by, I started to learn quite a lot of what I thought were interesting facts about your brain and mine, the human brain. And when I retired, somebody suggested that I could give a talk about the subject, and it kind of grew from there. I did also spend quite a few years actually researching on the brain as well. I was quite interested in some of the possible causes of dementia. And so now that I've retired, most of the talks that I give are kind of centered around how the brain works.
I believe you've also written a book called The Secrets of the Human Brain. That's also the name of a current series you're doing on the u3a site, isn't it?
Yes, that's right. I wrote the book some years ago now, which talks about different aspects. And some of the content of that book, I do use it in the talks that I give. I started giving talks online on Zoom, must be a couple of years ago, and I was surprised that they were quite so popular, so that this year I decided to give a few more. So I'm giving a few this year, and they're good fun. The series are titled Secrets of the Human Brain, but then each talk has an individual subtitle, shall we say. You see, when people first started to work out what the brain did, they thought it was just one huge giant silicon chip that did everything, a bit like the chip that's in your mobile phone, which does everything. But it turns out that the brain is not a single general chip, and we now know that different parts of the brain do different things. It's called functional localization. And so the talk I gave in January was a sort of guided tour when I explained how part of the brain does vision and part of it does hearing and part of it does language and that sort of thing. Most people know, of course, that the brain is an electric organ. Its nerve cells produce small voltages that becomes the language of the nervous system, and it's an electrical tissue. But it is also a chemical tissue. It's a chemical organ. We now know that there are more than 40 separate different regions of the brain which handle different aspects of vision. And all that has to be compiled and put together in the blink of an eye, so there are regions that are responsible for adding color to images. There are regions that are responsible for seeing movement rather than stationary things. There's other regions that understand depth. And then a huge chunk of the brain is involved with identifying what you see rather than just seeing an object. I mean, it's difficult enough to see an object anyway, but cameras can do that. But of course, a camera can see an object, but it won't know what the hell it's looking at. So there's a huge chunk of our brains which, having manufactured the image in the brain, and nobody knows exactly how it does it, but it does, then, of course, you have to work out what it is, and then its meaning to you, because you take a while to work out that you've got a gun pointing at you, but then you've got to work out that it is a gun, and then, of course, you're staring down the barrel. It has other meanings to you. So that's just an example. I mean, every single sense that comes into the body, whether it's vision or hearing or touch or taste or smell, everything comes in as what I call an external energy, But the brain, we then change that sense into an electrical signal, a digital electrical signal, and then the brain receives that digital electrical signal that is created. And then having made the electrical signal, the brain then has to recompile the electrical signals and recode it and put it back together so that what you finally see is an image or a sound and not just a signal. So it's incredible the way that it does it. We have a special dedicated region in our brain to do that for language, which is pretty much unique in humans. A rich spoken language is absolutely unique to us humans. No other animal really speaks, not really. Even chimpanzees, they kind of don't, if you're with me, they don't really talk words, do they? They make noises in their own language.
Yes.
But the spoken, rich language of humans is absolutely unique. And because we have a special region in the brain dedicated to being able to change that sound hitting the eardrum into a language. And it's uniquely on the left side in almost all people, actually, left side of the brain, not in the right side. The two sides of the brain are normally mirror images and they do the same things, but language is one thing that is pretty much kept to the left side in most of us. The size and complexity of the human brain hasn't really changed much since we came out of Africa. And we can understand things now that we couldn't understand before. I mean, we understand so much more than we could 2,000 years ago. But that's not necessarily because our brains are bigger and better. It's just that we have learned things. Our knowledge of the world around us and our knowledge of ourselves, which the brain generates, is the kind of most fascinating thing to me, I guess. As a neuroscientist, I'm interested in how the physical brain works, the nerve cells, how they work, how they interact, how they produce all sensations. But I should point out the connections between the nerve cells. We don't get more or less nerve cells, but the connections between them change in every person, in every second, throughout their lives, throughout millennium. So the brain is constantly changing, and your brain and mine is constantly changing, and that's one of the mechanisms how we learn. I'm a believer in the old famous saying of use it or lose it. There are some natural processes that will make people lose it faster than others. But generally speaking, try and keep your brain active doing things, even just conversation. And also try and keep moving physically as well, because that stimulates the brain. I know that doesn't seem to make sense, but moving physically also stimulates the brain. So use it as best you can.
So thanks to Maggie D and Bob Pullen for opening the door to the remarkable, mysterious world of the human brain. If you'd like to find out more about his talks, head to the u3a website and explore the ongoing Secrets of the Brain series. I hope you're enjoying the show. Have you thought about joining us as one of our guests? Do you have a story to tell, a learning experience you want to share with others? Whether it's a fascinating piece of history, a unique hobby, or a topic that's captured your imagination, you could feature in a future episode. Just tell us about it and we'll do the rest. We're eagerly waiting to hear from you. Contact us on communications@u3a.org.uk. communications@u3a.org.uk. And now back to the show. What do Churchill, Poirot and Donald Trump have in common? They all come to life through the voice of a professional comedian and actor who specialises in impersonating famous historical and contemporary characters. And his name is Tony Harris. Tony began his career back in 2011 as an impersonator at Hampton Court, where for 2 years he played Henry VIII for the benefit of more than 500,000 tourists. Since then, he's been bringing his unique blend of history and comedy to the speaker circuit and has performed in front of dozens of u3a meetings up and down the country. You may have even seen him and heard him already. In this episode, Tony shares with our reporter, Susie Hodges, how it all started and what keeps the audiences coming back for more.
Well, you start at the top and you work down, don't you? I was a journalist that was made redundant, and my wife at the time, she saw an advert. They were looking for Henry VIII actors for Hampton Court, and I went and auditioned, not thinking for a minute that I would get it. But the odd thing was that they wanted 3 men to play Henry, and they only had one costume. So they'd already picked one, and I just happened to be exactly the same size as that fella. So I got the job purely because I fitted the costume, nothing to do with my performance. But as it happens, they send you to Henry School. We went for 3 months, 3 afternoons a week to be lectured and take notes. We didn't sit exams, but it was like a learning process. And then we were unleashed on the public, and we used to do whole days worth of work broken down into sort of 3 or 4 half-hour performances. And it was all about the marriage to Catherine Parr in 1545. And so over the 2 years, I married Catherine Parr something like 600 and something times. I was heartily sick of her at the end of it, as you can imagine. So it was a great place to start, great place to learn. And when I left that contract, after the 2 years, I thought it would be such a waste if I didn't take it further. So that's when I got my own costume made and offered my services around all the sort of clubs and groups that book speakers. And the WI were first on board, but the u3a weren't far behind them. And I've been doing them ever since. And so that was 2011. So I've been doing it now all those years, 14, 15 years. I've done literally hundreds of u3as and WIs and similar groups over the years.
And how many characters do you have in your repertoire?
Well, I started off with just Henry, but I realised doesn't matter how good you are, a group will never rebook the same speaker. So I decided to add other characters. So Henry was my first, and then about 9 months later, I added Churchill, and then I added Sherlock Holmes, and then I added Hercule Poirot. So basically, I've added one every year, 1 or 2 every year since. So I now do 24 different talks.
Wow. And how much preparation time does it take in terms of listening to recordings of the voice of the character you're impersonating, watching films showing their mannerisms, and of course, finding out more about their lives?
Yeah, well, it is a lot of research, but I can do it all. I could research and write a new character in a week, because it just takes a couple of days of watching YouTube videos or documentaries on TV or things like that. And obviously you have to read. I'm a voracious reader, so my library is absolutely stuffed full of biographies and autobiographies of all the people that I play. And so you might know the whole story of Henry VIII's life, and you get a new book and you read it, and there's one fact in there that you'd never heard before, and that fact gets co-opted into the talk, as it were. So it's always building and always changing.
You mentioned that one of your first characters was Winston Churchill, the famous wartime leader. Can you give us a brief example for our listeners of how you impersonate him?
Well, shall I do one of his most famous couplets? And that was, "Never in the phase of human conflict has so much been owed by so many to so few." And so you have to get the speech impediments in, but also, here's the thing, you have to keep your voice up, because not every group are in great halls equipped with sound systems and everything else. And generally, I've got a voice like a foghorn, so I prefer not to work with audio equipment. I prefer to rely on my own. But whoever you're impersonating on that particular day, you have to make sure that they sound like the way people expect them to sound. I mean, for instance, nobody knows what Henry VIII sounded like, so I do him as a cross between Brian Blessed and Peter Ustinov when I'm doing Henry VIII, so I try and be avuncular, but at the same time with a big voice. Hello, what are you doing? Leave it out. I'm Henry VIII of that name. So you kind of have a bigger voice for him. And I'm a big lad, so it does help, that you've got the size and the stature. I'm over 6 foot and I weigh 20 stone, so I'm a big lad. And, I find that people will relate to the way you look. Everything I do is in costume, so I dress like the person. So from the moment I walk in the hall, there's no Tony Harris, it's all the character. So I'm always introduced as Henry or Churchill or Margaret Thatcher or whoever it might be.
And of course, with the famous cigar and the handbag.
Oh, yes, of course, you have to have the props, right, yes. So, I mean, I've got real cigars for Churchill, which I smoke outdoors when I'm working. But indoors, of course, I have to have big fake ones. But you don't light them. They're just stuck in your mouth, as it were. But yeah, you've got to have the right props. So I've got a Margaret Thatcher handbag. I've got the Churchill cigar and the hat and the glasses, which look right, the watch chain, all the little props and stuff. And I try and use as much realism as possible.
You mostly do historical figures or people who are no longer with us, but you told me earlier that you had added a performance of a particular contemporary figure. Now, let's see if our listeners can guess straight away who he is, if you give us an example of that character and how he sounds.
I should be delighted. I should be delighted to come. You're very honored to have me here. Very honored, because I'm a busy man, and everything we do is done for you. Remember that. I'm the best president the United States have ever had. The only young, vigorous president they've had in 200 years. I'm a young man. I can do it.
And what kind of reaction do you get when you play Donald Trump?
Gales of hysterical laughter, because obviously I play it for laughs. The things I talk about Canadians as snow monkeys, and I talk about building walls around whatever town I'm in. Yeah, I'm going to build a wall. I'm going to build a wall around you, a great wall, a big wall. And so it's done purely for laughs. I don't know whether the politics of what the characters are almost irrelevant, providing that people get some history, because nobody knows Donald Trump's background. His family were immigrants. They came, his father from Germany, mother from Scotland, for instance. And so, the story all has some continuity to it, but the gags, the jokes come from what the character says or what the character does.
Which character tends to be the most popular with your audience, and which is the one you most enjoy playing or impersonating?
Well, original and best, Henry VIII is the most fun, I think. The costumes are massive and I look very imposing. And so I would say that Henry's my favourite to do. But actually, the one I did most last year was Margaret Thatcher. Where there is discord, may we bring harmony. Where there is error, may we bring truth. Where there is doubt, may we bring faith. And where there are Hoovers, may we bring Dysons. So I try and twist everything to give it a laugh, and they absolutely love her.
From kings to prime ministers and even a certain American president, Tony brings his characters to life with wit, energy and accuracy. Thanks to Tony Harris and Susie Hodges for such a captivating story. Well, we certainly do bring some variety to you each month for sure. I do hope they strike a note with you and make you want to find out more or just learn. And then, as always, learn again. The month of June is just around the corner. As well as taking time out to enjoy the promised sunshine, please remember to tune into our next episode and keep me company. To entice you further, we have an intriguing story about babies being given away at birth. It's called In the Shadow of the Teapot, and you'll want to hear this one. Thanks to our guests for sharing their stories with us, and to our reporters, Susie Hodges and Maggie D, and of course Bob, my chief editor and producer. So for now, a big thanks from me for tuning into this episode. Just promise me you'll come back for more. This is Maggie West saying farewell for now, and I'll see you in June.